Here's to whiskey kisses, the peaty taste of sin.
It's whiskey time. Greetings, whiskey folk, and welcome back to Drinking Out Loud. I am your host, Adam Bradshaw, and today we are tasting the February 2025 Scotch Malt Whisky Society of Canada Outturn here at the Strath. And it's an absolutely outstanding Outturn. I had the pleasure of presenting this twice already, and it's about to, at time of recording, it's going online tomorrow morning. But there's an extra special part to this as well, because some of these bottles I'll be taking up with me and showcasing up at Comox as well, because they're having their whiskey festival tomorrow night, or tonight at time of release, I guess. I'm recording this on Thursday, releasing it on Friday. It's all a little timey-wimey. Alrighty, so wonderful Outturn. Before we get cracking on taking a look at some of the bottles, just a couple of announcements. First of all, yes, you might have heard in the local news if you're here in Victoria, and if you're not in Victoria, this might come as a shock to you, but it has been announced that the Strath is for sale. The Olsons, after about 79 years of owning the place, have decided to it's probably time to retire. Their kids aren't interested in taking it over, so it's up for sale, which is... It's always sad when a family business goes out of the family, but we're hopeful here at the Strath that whatever direction it goes in is a good one. And as far as we're aware, nothing is changing, especially in the time being. So don't panic. I had, as soon as it broke in the Times columnist and online a couple of days ago, I had a few people text me and ask what's going on and, are we okay? And is the SMWS going to be all right? Yeah, don't worry. It's fine for now, at least. We've been told business as usual, so carry on. There's always good whiskey to drink. So also, next month's tastings, I'm working on trying to get a third in there as well, but we're definitely going to be having one on February the 26th, which is a Wednesday evening, and Sunday, March the 2nd in the afternoon. You can also get tickets right now for our sister club, Whiskey Folk, here at the Strath, is having a whiskey showcase on Sunday, February the 16th. Tickets are available right now for that as well. And we're doing a tournament tasting, a tournament of brandy. For brandy is the seasonal spirit of the winter. This is going to be on Wednesday, February the 19th. Lots of Wednesdays and Sundays this month. Whiskey on a Wednesday, Whiskey Wednesday and Whiskey on a Sunday. That's actually two things that are out there. Whiskey on a Sunday is a great Irish folk song, and Whiskey Wednesdays is a podcast by Phil, I think his name is. He comes to the Whiskey Festival quite often. Anyway, I'm rambling. I should really start drinking some whiskey to stop myself from rambling. Although evidence does say that it doesn't necessarily help me stop rambling. All right, so starting off this Outturn, the first whiskey is the brightest of barrels. The nose immediately suggested sugar-dusted grapefruit, orange barley sugars, cantaloupe melon, and warm strop leather. In time, we got freshly varnished timbers, new sneakers, cream soda, and warm heather flowers. With water, we found lemon bonbons, Moffat toffee, sweet caramel on the outside with a sharp lemony taste in the centre, and then earthy touches of turmeric, damp tobacco leaf, and dried flowers in vase water. Is vase water a special type of water, or just normal water in a vase? And does the vase change the taste? I have so many questions. The palate opened with spearmint, pollens, and cloudy lemonade. The cask made its voice clear with assertive notes of cask char, cinnamon sugar, vanilla icing, and candied citrus peel, rich, sweet, and mouth-coating. Water revealed notes of young Calvados, dessert wines, spice cake, and apple pie. Lovely. This is the brightest of barrels. It is cask number 35.347. They managed to get 234 bottles out of the first fill ex-bourbon barrel, which was distilled in the Speyside region on the 28th of June 2012 and matured for 10 years. And it came out at 60.3% ABV, natural cask strength, of course. All right. Only a wee splash of these left. This is a fun one because I've been trying to figure out whether Glenmorangie actually often tastes of apples, or whether it's a Glenmorangie, by the way. I guess I just gave that away. Or whether I just associate Glenmorangie with apples, because I've said so many times the trivia that they were one of the first distilleries to use a cider cask. So I don't know. Are the apples really there, or am I just really susceptible to the power of suggestion? Maybe both. I don't know. But I'm definitely getting a lot of apples on this one. Yeah, apple, what's that stuff? Is it fruit sauce? I've probably mentioned this. I feel like it's becoming one of those things, a bit like how, like, vegans will always tell you that you're vegan. I've discovered that people who mountain bike will always tell you that they mountain bike. I mountain bike now. And one of my favourite snacks to have up on the mountainside is these things you can get from Costco. I think they're called fruit sauce. It's not quite fruit leather, but it's more like weirdly rectangular solid jam. There's an apple and strawberry one of those, and that's what I'm getting on the nose. Apple and strawberry fruit sauce. And that's SOURCE, not SAUCE, for those having trouble with my British accent. Yeah, lovely nose. And I've just this moment realised that I neglected to get myself any water for this tasting, so I'm sorry, all scientific research is out the window. I'm not doing this properly. There will be no adding of water. I'm doing just a straight through raw cask strength tasting today, apparently, because, well, the tape's already rolling. Yeah, a lot of powdered sugar and that sort of... It says grapefruit. I definitely agree with citrus, but I wouldn't be able to pin it down necessarily to a specific one. A specific one. There we go. And for those wondering why I'm stumbling over my words so much, it is like 7:45, I think, as I'm recording this, so... AM. First whiskey of the day. You know, they do say that your palate is actually better in the morning. A lot of master blenders will only work in the morning. And I have to admit, that is way more flavourful right now than I remember. Pro tip, drink whiskey in the morning, guys. It's much better. Yeah, that is... I'm really getting the vase water. Yeah, vanilla icing's a good note, because it does, especially now, after taking a sip and then nosing it, I'm specifically getting the icing that you get on, oh god, what's that called? Oh wow. I can't remember the name of this dessert. It was one of my favourites as a kid. It's like, hit me up in the comments if you remember it. I might remember it myself in a minute, but it's like... it's like a rectangle of pastry, and then a thick layer of custard, and then pastry again, and then like icing with a little drizzle of chocolate. And I can't for the life of me remember what that's called. I feel like it's Millionaire's something, like some kind of millionaire finger something. I don't know. whatever that thing's called. This reminds me of specifically the icing layer of it. So I've already given away that's Glenmorangie, but I'll tell you a little bit about Glenmorangie. Did you know that I've mentioned several times on this channel that it's owned by a French company that I can never quite remember how to pronounce it. La Martini Caisse? La Martini something. And how that they are the guys behind Label 5, which is the most popular blend in like France and Belgium and places. And you'll see it in half-size bottles behind the counter of every newsstand in Belgium. It's great. And more recently, of course, they are the Cutty Sark people. And they purchased Glenmorangie in 2008. They actually started getting into the whiskey business back in 1969 when they launched Label 5. So it took them a while to purchase their own distillery after having their own blend. But for consistency, it makes sense for blending houses to have a distillery. And, you know, that's a common trend these days with independent bottlers now having their own distillery as well. However, one thing I didn't know until I was looking into Glenmorangie again earlier this month was they actually have their own grain distillery as well. I had no idea. They built it in 2010, and it's just outside of Edinburgh, and it sounds like a Marvel character, partially because with my accent it's almost indistinguishable from an actual Marvel character, Star-Lord, but it's called Starlaw, Starlaw, Starlaw. I'd never heard of it, and now I kind of want to try some. Yeah, has anyone ever seen a Starlaw out in the wild? I've never seen one. Maybe they've never released whiskey on their own. Maybe they literally have never sold a cask outside of using it for Label 5 and Cutty Sark. But one thing I did discover is part of the thing that makes Cutty Sark Prohibition so good is that they're using this new Starlaw grain whiskey. So, based solely on my love of Cutty Sark Prohibition, it's probably pretty good grain whiskey. This is a sister cask to a couple that we've had recently. Lemon and lime shortbread from last March, and Darwin Stipple from October of 2022. So it has been a while since we've had something from this. And this whiskey is available right now at strathliquor.com for $160.78. And if it's no longer available by the time you're watching this video at strathliquor.com, check out our partner stores. Of course, you'll have Kensington Wine Market over in Calgary. You've got I need more coffee, apparently. 1 second. Keg and Cork in Edmonton, and Legacy in Vancouver, and once every quarter you'll also find the Outturns available at Arc in Kelowna, and I'm not sure whether they got this one. I probably should try and look that up in advance so I can tell you guys, but there's a chance, a smaller chance, but a chance you might find this at Arc in Kelowna. The Armstrong Regional Co-op, I recently discovered, is what ARC stands for, which is fun. Yeah, I really enjoy this. I really do. It's often the first whiskey you're tasting gets a little bit lost in the shuffle because everyone's excited about the things that they can see on the horizon, the other whiskies coming up. But we're lucky enough, of course, to be able to try these whiskies more than once. And going back to it a second time, it was like quite surprising. I enjoyed it much more the second time I had it, and I'm frankly enjoying it even more the third time. So this is a bit of a sleeper hit, to borrow a phrase from Evan, who I think used that to describe the next whiskey. This was one of Evan's favourites over at Kensington. Hi, Evan. This is Strolling, Lolling and Sipping. This one displayed a lightness of touch at first, with buttery popcorn, bergamot, and bubblegum, alongside pronounced pineapple notes, plus citrus curd and yellow flowers in the background. Reduction brought vanilla coconut custard, heather flowers, runny honey, and oat bars. The neat palate opened with a note of sweet mint tea, then more bubblegum, fruit salad juices, and limeade. Water brought out additional flavours of mango lassi, banana chips, dried apricot, and sandalwood. If you just watched my video on the Chinese whiskies that we launched recently, sandalwood is one of those flavors that I can't really describe any other way than it's sandalwood. And you don't really get the opportunity to chew on a piece of sandalwood very often, but vaguely incensey, I guess. All right, this is Distillery 46. This is actually one of my favorite numbers, 46.141. it's weird. I don't believe in fate or luck, but that number has followed me throughout my entire life. In like key pivotal moments, it pops up weirdly. So I don't know. Maybe this is the whiskey for me. It was my like school bus number growing up. It was the number of the flight I took when I left the UK, when I moved away from the country. It was the last 4 digits of my first phone number in Canada. It's just everywhere. It's very strange. Maybe it's just everywhere because I specifically notice it. Maybe other numbers are everywhere too, and there's probably some kind of philosophical razor for that. It's, Hanlon's razor and all that. It's probably, yeah. And if not, we'll call it Adam's razor, which obviously I used earlier today. All right. Strolling, lolling, and sipping. This is 46.141. It is 160 bottles out of a first fill ex-bourbon barrel from the Speyside region that was distilled on the 20th of April 2010 and aged for 12 years, coming out at 60.6% ABV. Alrighty. Elegant, easy, yet stimulating, with plenty of playful, fruity sweetness on display, perfect for the hip flask on an afternoon stroll. Speaking of hip flasks, one of my favourite whiskies that I sneakily got to try over the festival. There's one of the... I just realised that it's an unsanctioned whiskey. And it was never on display for the public. It was personal use only. It was an after-party thing. But I don't want to say who did this, but one of our brand ambassadors here in Canada, who's an absolute delight to spend time with, has a hip flask-based whiskey club that he belongs to, and they bottle very interesting whiskies. They had a Linkwood that was nicknamed Pickle Spice. Not because it tasted like pickles, but it was a story about a pickle that was left in a jar in the pub during COVID, that when they went back to it had expanded to several times its size in the jar. It's part of a Spice World series, apparently. Anyway, I divulge. The idea of whiskey in a hip flask is always a fun one. I find it hard though, because I've yet to find a hip flask that doesn't affect the flavour of the whiskey. It always feels slightly metallic. And I've tried plenty. I haven't tried them all. I actually just got gifted a new hip flask recently, so maybe I'll try that one and see how it fares. Alrighty. Not that I'm promoting drinking in public, of course, because that would not be kosher. This smells great. The bubblegum note really came out on the nose, which is funny because the repeat whiskey that we had at the in-person tastings was actually bubblegum buns, and I thought this was more bubblegummy than the one that was called bubblegum, so I thought that was kind of odd. Custard slice. Vanilla slice. I remembered the dessert from the last whiskey. It's called a vanilla slice, guys. I got there in the end. And for those of you who've already commented that below, perhaps, thank you for confirming. There is this... Yeah. There's a nice sort of pineapple-y, jelly, trifle-y thing going on in this one. Lots of custard, fruit, jelly. It's so different on the nose than it is on the palate. I still get that pineapple, but there's a lot more... It's a dirty pineapple on the palate. There's a little bit of like coffee grounds and, dark chocolate and those darker kind of notes. It's a light and bright. It's what's that word? There was a word in Star Wars for there was the dark side and the light side, and then there was the one that was in the middle. There's this big weird like space dog thing who's neither on the light side or the dark side. He's the one in the middle. Anyway, it's that in a whiskey form. So early mornings I just can't remember anything in the morning. Apparently, I'm learning. I can taste better, but I can't speak very well. Yeah, that's a bloody lovely whiskey. I think you're onto something there, Evan. He described this as the sleeper hit of the tasting. It is. It's very pleasant. Yeah, quite lovely. So this distillery was built in 1876 to supply whiskey for the brand new at the time, well, not brand new, but fairly new at the time, blended whiskey category, which only became legal in 1860 or thereabouts. So as soon as blending, and what that means is like you could pre-blend things and sell them blended, like in a cask form, usually. So before that, all of the blending happened by the merchant, pretty much, or the individual, I guess, but like Johnny Walker and Sons, you would buy a bunch of whiskey, blend it, and sell it out of their store, whereas now companies were allowed to blend whiskey and then sell it to other people to sell, you know? So that really did a number on the industry. It was suddenly massive. And it became even more massive when it rose to prominence because of the outbreak of phylloxera, which I mentioned earlier that we're doing a blind tasting of brandies. Did you know that brandy was the drink of choice by the Scottish aristocracy? And it only switched to whiskey because of phylloxera. So that was a disease that affected all the grape harvests, and they couldn't make brandy for quite a while. So suddenly whiskey became more prominent. And even in France, whiskey still to this day is drunk, I think, on par with brandy, even in the place where brandy is most well known, which is quite cool. So thank you, I guess, disease, for helping the whiskey industry. This wonderful Glenlossie is available right now at strathliquor.com. At the time of recording, it is $177.30. So again, just like whiskey number one today, only available to existing members. It is under that $180 mark, so if you are interested in joining the SMWS, you will have to buy something over $180 first to be able to get that membership. Lovely. Yeah. That is a lovely whiskey. And now onto the one that I think, at least in the blinded booklets, caught everyone's attention most of all, because of course it is a black label whiskey, and that can only mean good things here at the SMWS. Welcome to Overpowering Enchantment. The nose led us through a perfumed garden to a house made of sticky toffee pudding and malt loaf, where a pipe-smoking witch lured us with fruit pastels, pear drops, and yum-yums. She indulged our palates with Battenberg cake, toffee waffles, and crêpe Suzette. Toffee waffle. That's a very satisfying thing to say. So delicious, we hardly noticed the finish of spiced plums, cinnamon swirls, and crystallized ginger, seducing us softly to the dark side. The reduced nose combined torments of fruit salad and lemon drizzle cake with teasements of prune juice and cedar wood. The palate's chocolate-coated raisin and banana whip sweetness was tempered by fruit skins, walnuts, and after-dinner mints. And yes, it is as good as it sounds. This is 9.288. An outturn of only 135 bottles came out of this first-to-fill ex-bourbon barrel. It was distilled in the Speyside region on the 11th of September 2003 and aged for 19 years, coming out at 52.7% ABV. And a fun little twist, this has a very unique back label. And the story of that is that it was intended for a different market. And I'll see if you can guess which market when I show you the back label. It's in Chinese. And there's even little QR codes that I'm kind of afraid to scan because I don't know where it'll end up. But I did do some Google translating, and it was quite good. They did a fairly decent job at. It's always funny when you translate something gets translated from English to another language, and then you translate it back. It never quite works out the same. We did a Rabbi Burns dinner at university with that I absolutely loved, where they got Google Translate, which was nowhere near as good in the early 2000s as it is now. It was translating Scots English, so I don't know how good it would be now either, to be honest. But we translated Rabbi Burns' poetry into German and then back again, and we got the absolute glorious line that what is normally the chieftain of the pudding race became the Kaiser of the sausage people. And I love Kaiser of the sausage people. I think it's a glorious phrase. I'm actually I'll use Google Translate right now, actually. This is just to see how well it does. So the front label says, a perfumed garden, a house made of cake, and a pipe-smoking witch bearing sugary temptations, a teasingly sweet seduction to the dark side. And if I use Google Translate on the back here, that section comes out to, key malt. It translated single malt whiskey as key malt warrior. Love it. Here we go. The scented gardens, cake houses, and pipe-smoking witches are all sweet temptations that lure people into darkness. They sure are. All right. Strange time in the whiskey industry when China's sending whiskey back or like not accepting shipments. That's an odd one, isn't it? But hey, they are making their own whiskey now, so maybe they need less scotch, and maybe that's a good thing because it means more for the rest of us. So this colour right here, this is the Old and Dignified, and it's probably, I think it's the rarest colour in the SMWS from what gets brought over here to Canada at least. Although we do get a surprisingly small amount of the light pink one, the light and the whatever that one is, sprightly, young and sprightly. We don't get many young and sprightly ones either. So we kind of, it's like a bell curve. We get low amounts of the ones in the middle and a lot in the middle. Yeah, sorry, low ones on the edge and a lot in the middle. It's fun. And heavily peated we don't see that many of. Oily and coastal is probably next, but I think this is probably the rarest, and it makes sense because of what it means. You can generally only get old and dignified flavour profiles from old and dignified whiskies, which are harder to come by and more expensive. Yeah, that's lovely though. This, again, there's something about this whiskey that reminds me of helping my mum prune the rosehip bush back in England. Oddly specific memory. But yeah, it's the aftertaste. And the aftertaste reminds me of rosehip. And the first sort of big hit on the palate reminds me of the leather gloves that you'd wear when pruning the rosehips. I miss gardening. I've not done any gardening for a long time. Let's do some gardening. And it's interesting. It's several times I've done that now, specifically with this whiskey. The whole like bubbling like you do with wine. You're not supposed to do that with whiskey because it kind of wrecks the whole experience. You know, you're just breathing alcohol fumes. And I've found myself being drawn to do it with this several times. And I think it's because it reminds me of drinking dry white wines. There's a lot of those sort of mineralic sort of notes, like a Picpoul de Panay kind of dry French wine. It triggers this weird reaction in me to go, and I don't know why I do it. It's really hard not to. That is absolutely gorgeous, though. Freshly polished wooden planks. There's kind of a dusty piano. It's like a dusty piano. I don't know why it's a piano, but it is. I'm not sure about the toffee waffle. I don't really get as much sweetness personally as the tasting notes suggest, but I'm just one person. Don't trust me. Just trust the tasting notes first and foremost. I'm just here to give an extra layer to it. Battenberg cake's a fun one though. It's not really a thing here. If you ever go to the British import section in Fairways or something, you might see it. It's this weird cake where the cross section looks like the Windows logo. You know, it's like a little checkered pattern. Depending on the brand, it's different colours, but it's usually like brown and yellow kind of little checker thing. And it's marzipan flavoured cake, essentially. Love a crepe Suzette. Cinnamon swirls. My partner Kristen's really into baking, and she's been experimenting with some new recipes recently, partially because we moved house and we've got a nicer kitchen to be cooking in. Last night when I got home, I was treated to some freshly baked Japanese milk bread, which she then put cinnamons, dusted with like butter, sugar, and cinnamon. Oh my god. And yeah, this kind of has that sort of cinnamony sweetness. Alright, so distillery number 9. What is it? Where is it from? Well, it's a distillery we're fairly familiar with here at the SMWS, although it has been a while since we had one. We haven't had a Distillery 9 since March of 2023, Splendiferous, which, oddly enough, was actually a sister cask to this one, as was August 2022's Hits the Sweet Spot and May 2022's Expert Generalist. it kind of feels like this is an older version, of course, than those ones. And it almost feels like, you know someone who goes away for a while, perhaps they've gone to university, and then they come back and they're like a slightly more well-rounded, refined version of themselves. Yeah, this is post-university distillery number 9. The distillery number 9 is a great distillery. It's one of the original single malts. It was exported to Italy, partially by accident because they ran out of grain whiskey, so they decided to test the idea of just sending malt, and the Italians loved it. Their only complaint was it was too old. They wanted something younger. And to this day, you can still buy a 5-year-old Glen Grant in Italy on the shelves. Interesting about Glen Grant as well. It is apparently, and I didn't know this bit, the birthplace of Dennis Malcolm, OBE, who was actually born at the distillery, apparently, which is wild. Especially as he then started working there at age 16 as an apprentice cooper, and last year retired after 63 years in the company, ending his career as master distiller, which is an absolute wonderful journey. And we have a little bit of a local link to Dennis Malcolm, actually, because Lawrence Graham, the founder of the Victoria Whiskey, or one of the founders, sorry, of the Victoria Whiskey Festival, and the founder of the Victoria chapter of the Companions of the Quake and the VSMC, and like all things whiskey here. And the only reason I have a job selling whiskey in Victoria is because of the foundations that Lawrence Graham set. And that is... that is really quite true. But Lawrence is a keeper of the Quake, which is an honour bestowed upon people in the whiskey industry who are deserving. And the class of inductions from Lawrence Graham, it was himself, Keith Cruikshank, who was the distiller of Ben Romack at the time, and Dennis Malcolm, all became keepers of the Quake together, which I think is really cool. So this is, of course, a Glen Grant. It is a 19 years aged Glen Grant, and it is available in strictly limited supplies, a few bottles left at strathliquor.com for $269.48, which is an unbelievable price for a Black Label Glen Grant. I'm sure it won't last long. All right, next up we have Hoisin Duckskin, one of my favourite ones to say this month. Hoisin Duckskin. Sounds like a West Country greeting, like something a hobbit would say. Oi there, Bilbo, Hoisin Duckskin. I don't know. Anyway, Hoisin Duckskin. Delightfully sweet aromas of maple syrup, caramel wafers, and cherry sweets merged with pencil shavings mixed with peppermint oil before burnt banana bread was served with strawberry jam and a vanilla milkshake. The palate was opulent rich, with shortbread, marzipan, and baked pineapple joining cinnamon and nutmeg toffee apples, while hoisin sauce mixed with peanuts and sesame oil. A few drops of water came wild strawberries and Turkish delight, with the heightened oiliness of linseed, orange oil, and toasted pine nuts. Hazelnut and walnut oil then joined the party alongside ground coffee, burnt orange skin, and mango jam, before eucalyptus and peppermint returned on the long finish. Lovely. This is a very interesting whiskey. This is a bourbon whiskey. It was aged for 4 years, distilled in Chicago, on the 6th of July, 2017. It was put into, of course, a first fill, but this is a char 3/4 cask, so a much smaller cask, a 30 US gallon barrel. 60.1% alcohol, 132 bottles coming from distillery B4. This is B4.9, and the first ever time we've had a B4. We've never had a B4 before. Should have cracked that joke at the live tastings. That would have killed. Oh well. Obviously a very interesting time to release a bourbon here in Canada. We've been having a few trade issues with our southern friends. On that, I will touch on that a little bit. So here in BC, obviously at time of recording at least, and anything could change at any time, and that's part of the problem. The tariffs have been apparently delayed for 30 days. So the original plan when the tariff threat was very imminent, the BCL pulled the top 5 best-selling items specifically from red states and left blue states alone, which I think is I think almost makes more of a statement, and it's also important to remember that like we're very close neighbours with some very prominent trading partners for our province. Here in BC, like, we do a lot of trading with Washington and California and Oregon as well. And they're our friends. We like them a lot. I mean, everyone in America is our friend. This is not about friendship. We're not the responses to the tariffs are nothing to do with not liking American people. It's about having issue with the American. It's not even politics, policies, I guess, specifically with trade right now. Like, politics and whiskey have always been weirdly intertwined. I try and keep them as separate as possible. With good whiskey's good whiskey, you know? Personal opinions aside, there are good people from every country in the world, and many of them make great whiskey. And where they're from should not punish them or their whiskey. However, the trade issues right now are pretty critical. So when the BCL pulled those 5 items, they also then said that things aren't being restocked either. So they would leave everything else on the shelf and then restock things later on. Our response here at the Strath was we were just going to pull everything. And not necessarily, like, we're not trying to punish the states, we're trying to help Canada. Because we're always going to be intertwined with the states with our trade relations here in Canada. We buy so much from the US and they buy so much from us. And a lot of it, we don't really have a choice there. That's where we get things from. Like, if we want a certain vegetable at a certain time of year, that is what happens. We have to buy it from the States. You know, if they want a certain mineral, they have to buy it from Canada, you know. And it makes sense. But I think when there are local alternatives that could be had, it's important to try and do what you can when you can. So, like I said, we're not trying to punish the states. We very much like our trade relations with many bourbon manufacturers down in red states, and we consider them friends. But right now, it's a little harder to support them financially, I guess. So the way it stands right now, the tariffs are still being threatened to us. And that's still very much looming over our heads. I described it as a sword of Damocles. It's like the tariffs do damage, but the threats of damage are, like, pretty damaging as well. So our response at the Strath is currently that we're leaving everything on the shelf, but we are not restocking anything from a red state. And that's just the plan going forward right now. And again, that's not because we dislike them. It's not because we don't want to support them. We're trying to help support alternatives. Like, Canada will need the help right now. But on top of that, we don't know what's going to happen. We could at any second be suddenly told we're not allowed to sell them. And we, as a small family business that is, you know, currently up for sale, so that tells you somewhat of what's going on here, we can't afford to be having a whole bunch of stock of things that we can't sell. So it's also, you know, and you know, that was the real tipping point for us, is we don't want to be left with a whole bunch of stock that we can't do anything with. So that's part of the reason. So hopefully that explains a little bit of what's going on. But that doesn't matter for this one, because Illinois is a blue state. So this is completely... doesn't matter for this whiskey anyway. This is going to remain on the shelf, apparently, whatever happens here in BC. Anyway, on with the show. Bourbon. Wow, there's really not much left in this. It's like a dribble. It's not worth saving. There we go. It's funny how some pour spouts are a little bit more active than others. It's they're never a perfect measure, but they're close enough. Yeah. I really enjoyed this bourbon. It was my first ever time having something from this distillery. Not my first ever time having something from Illinois, though. In fact, one of my favorite bourbons is from Wheeling, Illinois, Oppidan. We've not been able to get it for quite a while now. But yeah, one day maybe I'll visit Illinois and visit these guys and visit Oppidan. That'd be a fun trip. Oh, it's got a great nose. Really does. Using smaller casks for this style of whiskey just works really well, and we're familiar with that here in Victoria because one of the sort of more American style whiskies that we get here is the quarter cask, the quarter cask ancient grains from Divine, which is sadly, unfortunately, closing. And yeah, you get so much wood influence in a short amount of time. The ancient grains is only aged for like a year and a quarter, and when it's done in a quarter cask. This is 4 years in a, and interesting thing on quarter cask as well, because it depends on where you're from as to what size. A lot of people think that these little, these little tiny casks, like 30 US gallons, are what Lefroy quarter cask uses. But no, in America, a quarter cask is kind of like more quarter barrel, but still seemingly not quite a quarter barrel. Whereas in the UK, or and probably elsewhere, it's traditionally a quarter butt, so not that much smaller. Like a quarter cask that Lefroy uses is like 150 litres instead of 200, or something along those lines. Anyway. That's lovely. Yeah. There were some questions at the tasting about the mash bill, and often when we have an SMWS bourbon, it actually states the mash bill. So I can answer that a little bit now. I can't guarantee that this is exactly this, but their standard mash bill at this distillery is 70% corn, 20% rye, and 10% malted barley. Yeah, that's sesame oil. It really... There is something weirdly, beautifully like Asian barbecue about this bourbon. It's a note that I don't... It's one of my common complaints about bourbon. It's a very interesting category, and the more I learn, the more I enjoy bourbon as a category. But I started off from a place of not really enjoying bourbon simply because I thought it all tasted kind of the same. There's a much narrower band of tasting notes in a bourbon compared to Scotch, I would say. However, that seems to be changing, especially with some of the smaller craft distilleries like this. I've never come across like Asian sort of flavors like this in a bourbon before, and I really, really quite like it. It works surprisingly well, I would say, with the more common sort of, burnt sugars and orange kind of flavors. Strawberry jam. Whoa, Blackberry, strawberry jam. Yeah, burnt banana bread. Wouldn't know. I've never burnt a banana bread. I invested in a kitchen timer, so that thing wouldn't happen. There's something a little banana-y. Not as banana-y as like Jack Daniels, for example, has this really banana-y note, and that apparently comes from the yeast. Not that level of banana-y, but there is a touch in here. So, about the distillery. This distillery in Chicago is actually in Evanston, which is like a suburb, I guess, of Chicago. It's on Chicago Avenue in Evanston, in Illinois. And Evanston, once upon a time, was a dry city due to its links with the women's Christian temperance movement specifically. And the name of this distillery is a somewhat ironic nod to this, taking the initials from the movement's leader, Frances Elizabeth Willard. This is FEW, Few Distillery in Chicago, Illinois. And this bottle, for a limited time only, is available at strathliquor.com for $199.91. Please enjoy. Lovely. Yeah, I think that might be my favourite bourbon so far. It's a toss-up between this and that Tennessee one we had from Dickel. That Dickel was incredible. But yeah, I think part of the reason that I'm opening my eyes up to enjoying bourbon a lot more is thanks to the SMWS, and hopefully some of you more Scotch-centric people who came to the tastings are feeling the same way. So thank you, SMWS, for introducing us to Few Distillery from Chicago, Illinois. I have 2 bourbons that I enjoy from Chicago now. Who'd have thunk it? Alrighty. Next up from the Deep, Rich and Dried Fruits collection, we have Rich, Dark and Sumptuously Sweet. The nose delighted us with fruitcake, majoring on golden sultanas, milk chocolate with hazelnuts, pumpkin pie with nutmeg, and acorn-fed ham. The palate neat was robust and impressive, delivering deep flavours of wine-soaked oaks, fig rolls, caramel and grilled pineapple before a finish of cinnamon, burnt leaves and strong menthol lozenges. The reduced nose got treacle toffee, moist gingerbread, and orange marmalade on burnt buttered toast. On the palate, we now found ripe fig, pomegranate molasses, whole wheat soda bread, roasted chestnuts, and root beer, A rich, dark, and sumptuously sweet combination. After 11 years in ex-bourbon wood, we transferred this into a first fill Oloroso barrique. Yes, we did. Well, we didn't. The SMWS did. This is Distillery 85, and this is cask 94 from that. They got 279 bottles out of that final Oloroso barrique. It's from the Speyside region, distilled on the 2nd of March 2010, and it was aged for 14 years, coming out of the cask at 58.3% cask strength. Lovely. A little bit of sherry. I think this is the only sherried whiskey this tasting, which is kind of interesting. We've had a string of tastings that have been quite heavy on the sherry. Ooh, there's enough of a dribble in there that someone else can try this later. I'll save it. I'll save Will a little bit. All right. Brett never actually got to try these. He's probably interested. All right. Oh, yeah. It reminds me of white chocolate Kit Kats, which is something that I've only ever found in the dollar store at the Bay Centre in Victoria. I don't know why they had them, and I don't know why I've not found them elsewhere. But white chocolate Kit Kats are really quite good. Ah. Yeah, it's interesting. Acorn-fed ham. How different is acorn-fed ham to ham from other fed pigs? Does the acorn come through? I wouldn't have thought that acorn was a particularly strong flavour. I did recently, well, I say recently, a year and a half ago, I guess, have a cake that was made with acorn flour. That was really cool. I'm surprised that innovation hasn't caught on, because it was really quite delicious. Quite dense, but very, very pleasant. Yeah, hints of acorn. No. The pumpkin pie thing, though, yeah, this is the closest I'd want to get to a pumpkin spice whiskey, because I feel like pumpkin spice is a little overdone at this point. Yeah. Oh. Chocolate-covered raisins, the glossettes. Yes. Oh. I'm glad I'm doing this video, because I really do get to focus and enjoy the whiskies a lot more when I'm on camera like this, rather than at the tastings. Because at the tastings, like, I can't have much. I can have a tiny little sip to taste it, but I can't drink the whiskey, really, because I'm working. Yeah. Sitting down and just being able to concentrate a little bit more on the flavours and not worry about, do water jugs need refilling? Does someone have a question? And, is the music too loud? Is my head too shiny? Well, I do worry about that on camera, actually. More so on camera. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice. Pomegranate molasses. I've never had pomegranate molasses, but I feel like after tasting this, I could kind of understand what that might taste like. Yeah, roasted chestnuts, though. That is a good call. It's like having roasted chestnuts that have had sherry splashed on them. That sounds really nice, actually. Someone should try that. Yeah, sherry seasoned roasted chestnuts. I think coming soon to a Christmas market near you. Alrighty. Alright, so this is from, like I said, a distillery in Speyside. Lots of Speysides this month. Which is nice. It showcases the variety that one region can have, and it does make an awful lot of whiskey. This is one of the many distilleries that were founded during the boom period of the late 1890s, and I've said on record several times that if you find a distillery that was founded in the late 1890s that's still around today, odds are it's a bloody good distillery, because only the good ones survived. That was a brutal time in the year 1900. It was an absolutely brutal time for the whiskey industry, and only the tough survived. And this is one of them, kind of. It closed down after only 5 months of operation, but was purchased and reopened 6 years later. So it had a blip, but it eventually survived. This hasn't really had much of an official bottling presence. It was once part of Diageo's Hidden Malts collection back in 2002, which I really, really wish that I was of drinking aged and enjoying whiskey at that time, because the Hidden Malts collection sounds like it's right up my alley. I was unfortunately not drinking. I was 14 in 2002. Didn't stop me from having the odd pint, but I wouldn't have been drinking cask-strength whiskey. And yeah, Diageo's Hidden Malts collection consisted of this distillery, which is a really quite good one, with Kalila, Kleinleash, and Glen Ord, three of my favourites. And this is another Glen. This is Glen Elgin. Yeah. Funnily enough, not in Elgin. It's in the village of Longbourn, apparently. I'm not big on Bayside geography, so I don't know. I assume they're relatively close to each other, and maybe Longbourn is technically part of Elgin, but I saw the address, said it was in the village of Longbourn, and thought, that's weird. So, I don't know. You tell me. This is available to to existing members, but also would be a great bottle to start your SMWS journey. It is $217.30 available right now at strathliquor.com/SMWS. Delightful. And we move now on to the peated chapter of this tasting. One more sip, hang on. I like that so much more today than I did in the in-person tastings. That's a really good whiskey. Anyway, moving on to the peated section of today's tasting. We have two peated whiskey today, and we're starting off with a river, an entire river of complexity. Deep and complex for its age, the nose had fresh peppermint, cut grass, and the banks of a river nearing the sea. We also found hints of smoke and balsamic. On the palate, the smoke was more obvious and intensified with time, accompanied by toffee apples, licorice, treacle, and wood char, plus teasing pouches of elderflower, mango, and herbs tossed on a barbecue. Adding water brought lemon bonbons to the nose and evoked the sea, with lobster pots drying in sun. The mouth-coating, chalky palate had clean flavours of lemon zest, sea purslane, I don't know what that word is, purslane. I'm going to Google that, and carbolic with ashy finish. All right, quick, Google to the rescue. What the hell is purslane? I don't think I've ever come across that word in my life. Purslane. It's a herb. It's a food. Common purslane is a low-growing plant with succulent leaves. It is considered quite nutritious because it's usually high in omega-3 fatty acids and contains significant amounts of vitamin A and C. Huh. It's some kind of... interesting. It's some kind of herb greenery thing. It's also known as little hogweed. Little hogweed. That's a cute nickname, isn't it? How are you doing, my little hogweed? Anyway. Oh, and I should mention, I should have mentioned at the top of the show, the artwork in today's whiskies is, of course, AI generated. We've been experimenting with that because it's hilarious, some of the screw-ups that it does. How big was that lobster? And you might have guessed by now it was inspired by Banksy. Today's Outturn Whiskey with Expert Noses, you can see the image on the front of the booklets was the panel had been blindfolded, and it made me think of, anonymity in whiskey is really interesting, and anonymity in art is really interesting as well, because we don't really know who Banksy is. Which also means that how could he sue us for using his artwork? We could have used real Banksys. Yeah, well. So yeah, Banksy-inspired artwork. And as always, AI has done a really interesting job at capturing that. Alrighty. A river of complexity indeed. So this is Taiwanese. It is from a first fill ex-bourbon barrel. It was aged again for 4 years, the same age as that bourbon, but this tastes a lot older. Distilled on the 23rd of March 2018. They got 210 bottles out of the cask. It's 57.1% alcohol, and it's cask 138.19. Yeah, it does have a wonderfully coastal Lachey kind of a nose. There's a lemon cleaning thing, like lemon pledge, not pledge. Pledge is the polish, isn't it? Lemon, the stuff that Windex, like a lemon Windex, in the best way possible. That's very much a whiskey asterisk note, Lemon Windex, but in a good way. Oh my. The palate is... There's a lot happening. And it's interesting because it feels very upfront. It's a very... almost in an Ardbeg kind of way. Like, there's so much of that light, bright smoke flavour, but not as much of like a malty base behind it. It feels like it's like floating on the water. Smoke on the water. It's floating on the salt water. Yeah. Cut grass, absolutely. It's got that sort of mango-y thing. Does it say mangoes in here? It does, yeah. It's definitely got that mango tropical kind of fruit flavour going on. Definitely with the herbs. And there is that sort of coastal seafoody thing. I don't know about lobster per se, but maybe like scallops. Scallops without the bacon this time. There's bacon wrapped scallops is a weirdly common note in peated whiskey, but I'm not getting the bacon, just the scallops this time. Yeah, that's lovely. It feels so close to getting to that medicinal side of peated whiskey, but it doesn't tip over it. It's not quite medicinal, but it feels like it maybe could, or not should be, but could be medicinal. Yeah, I think that's my favourite so far from this distillery, and it's an interesting distillery. I was obviously on the in the in-person tastings, I hadn't revealed that it was from Taiwan, so this trivia was far more confusing. It was founded in 1977, and this distillery claims to be one of the first to finish whiskey in fruit wine casks, including lychee wine and plum wine. I want to try that. I want to try an ex-lychee wine whiskey from this distillery. This is Nantao from Taiwan, and it's part of the other trivia that I mentioned as well is that it's the company that owns this distillery only owns one Scotch whiskey distillery. It's not one of these giant conglomerates. It's, almost stoically independent, and that's because it's owned by the government. Yes, this is owned by the Taiwanese government. Yeah. Sometimes the government can do right. Yeah, lovely whiskey. Available again in limited quantities. I think we've got 1 or 2 bottles left of this. It's on the shelf right now for $208.61 here at the Strath. Strathliquor.com/SMWS. All right, our final whiskey today is one that's it got leaked. Yeah, no, the dirt sheets came out and people knew this one was coming because this was actually featured at the Victoria Whisky Festival. Our final whiskey is the long-awaited Finesse of a Fragrant Furnace. A fine bouquet of fragrant flowers and scorched watermelon mingled with molten wax before it dripped onto tarry ropes. There are also iodine elements of seaweed scattered on a shellfish platter. The palate had fine finesse, juicy and charred pineapple, but devilishly good as butter melted over toasted coconut and just a nuance of eucalyptus converged with powdery coal tar. What could a dash of water do? Now wonderfully clean smoke engulfed the maritime familiarity of walks along the beach. Flowers were dotted about the sand dunes and herbal notes morphed into sweet phenols and antiseptic cream on peach skin. Actual peaches or... Anyway, yeah, the Finesse of a Fragrant Furnace. This is an Islay whiskey. It was bottled for the Fégil Festival in 2023, but also the SMWS's 40th anniversary. So this is almost a couple of years. This has been waiting to be released. It's been held in reserve for the right time. It is 18 years aged. It was distilled on the 16th of February 2004. And the Outturn is 1,173 bottles. Because this is a Fégil bottling, the SMWS wanted the whole world to be able to take part in it together. So it's not just a single cask, but rather a blend of several casks, second fill bourbon and Oloroso hogsheads. Still, of course, all from the same distillery. This is a single malt, and it came out at 56.9, and it's from distillery number 3. Yeah, this is my pick of the Outturn from the in-person tastings. Let's see if it holds up today. Quite a wonderful whiskey. I mean, it promises a lot, to be honest. It's an 18-year-old distillery number 3. It's highly unlikely to not be a fantastic whiskey. Yeah, and it stands up, I think. and I was mentioning at the table, like, the only reason this isn't a black label is because it was the festival release. I don't think at the time, I think they have since, but I think back in 2023 they hadn't released any labels that had this artwork on a black label. I think that might be the case. Either way, like, this should be a black label by any normal SMWS metric. That is beautiful. That is an English muffin fresh off the frying pan with a kippers. It's I've never had kippers on an English muffin. I've never actually had kippers for breakfast, mummy dear and mummy dear. Maybe they have them in Texas, where everyone's a millionaire. So that's the Logical song, isn't it? From who sings the Logical song? Supertramp. Love Supertramp. Oh, there's this just wonderful, like, heather and bracken wild herbiness that is then, like, not engulfed in flame, but, like, wafted with smoke. It's the most delicious Yorkshire wildfire you've ever had. It's like the Yorkshire moors caught fire, and then that smell is drifting over to Hull, where they're pulling fish and seafood out of the water. Or maybe Grimsby. I used to live near Grimsby. I actually there's a fantastic, for anyone who knows about Grimsby and Cleethorpes, which is a select few people watching this video, I assume, maybe one of you. The Venn diagram of people who are interested in the video I'm about to describe is probably very small. I recently discovered one of my favourite professional wrestlers, because I enjoy professional wrestling. It's a soap opera with acrobatics. A guy called Joe Hendry. His whole gimmick is that he comes to the ring and does songs about the like his opponent or the place that he's doing, and they just did this wonderfully epic song about how rubbish Grimsby is, to the tune of "You Say It Best When You Say Nothing at All." Just, as someone who used to live near Grimsby, made me real smile. And yeah, this is a very Grimsby whiskey somehow. Yeah, this is quintessentially distillery number 3, but more different and interesting. Which actually is a quintessential part of distillery number 3. They're not all the same, but they all have that similar sort of herbal, smoky background. That a lot of people find that of the Islay distilleries, this is the one that they can most commonly pick out. Personally, I find Lafroig easier to pull from a crowd, although the amount of times recently I swore blind something was a Lafroig and it was actually from the English Whiskey Company, St. George's Distillery, is embarrassing. But yeah, this is Bowmore, of course. And did you know that the village of Bowmore was actually only founded 10 years before the distillery was? They only waited 10 years to build a distillery. Yeah. And I'm sure some people thought that was 10 years too long. This is, of course, one of the oldest distilleries in Scotland, one of a handful that still operate that were founded in the 1700s. It is home to the oldest whiskey maturing warehouse, I think, in the world, the number 1 vaults, which is actually part of the seawall, so the waves crash up against the side of it, which potentially will add a little bit of that maritime flavour to some of their whiskies. However, I do say some of their whiskies because only a very, very, very small amount of their whiskey is actually matured in the number 1 vaults. But still, it somehow retains that very maritime-y, saltwatery flavour. We love Bowmore. It's a great distillery. For good reason, it is one of the most collected, highly thought-of distilleries in the world. And it's always a pleasure to be able to get one of these more unique single cask varieties from the SMWS. As such, it is available in limited quantities right now. Strathliquor.com or one of our partner stores. Here in BC, it's $382.52, $382.52. And available right now at strathliquor.com/SMWS. Enjoy. Yeah. Thanks for joining me. It's been a wonderful outturn. I very much look forward to doing this all over again next month. It's going to be a good one. There's another one that was leaked, I guess, that people already know about from the Victoria Whiskey Festival, and they are very excited. I have, I think, 3 people all already wanting me to put a bottle aside for them of something that's coming out next month. And frankly, as much as it's a very exciting whiskey, it's not the one that I'm most excited to try. So as exciting as that whiskey is, there's even more excitement to come. So yeah, please do get your tickets to come in person to here at the Strath or at one of our partner stores. And if you can't make it in person, I look forward to seeing you on the video, hopefully. So until that time, stay safe, stay well, and enjoy a couple of drams. I'll see you on the other side. Sláinte.
Give me one more cup of coffee and I'll be on my way. Just stop to see if life was treating you okay. Just stop to see if you were doing fine, and to tell you you're not on my mind most of the time. You're not on my mind most of the time. Doing just fine. I had a dream last night and in it you were there. You told me I looked older, told you I still cared. Then you said you had to leave, and then you turned and you walked away. Tried to tell you how I feel, but all that I could say was most of the time. You're not on my mind most of the time. Doing just fine most of the time. You're not on my mind most of the time. Doing just fine. Good at that game they call love. I never could play by the rules exactly as I should. I never really wanted it to win, but hey, that's the way it goes. Now I stand here guilty. Now our case is closed for most of the time. You're not on my mind most of the time. Doing just fine most of the time. You're not on my mind most of the time. Doing just fine.